Oh, hi. Hello. I'm sorry. I still get kind of caught off guard. Um, Hello and welcome to Monday, August the 23rd. And welcome to my reading tonight. I'm going to be reading from the sixth book of my series. It's called Renaissance. And last week um, we were on book five, and I think it was called Revelry. And Rowan was telling the story of the Japanese Americans and the relocation camps, and he's telling it from both a Walkervillian and things that happened, with people in his family helping the Japanese Americans. And he's also talking about it as a history professor in colleges because that's something that he has as part of his curriculum. So this book kind of continues that vein, along that vein, and we follow and meet the Miyoshi family, and they are an important part of the Walkerville community, but they've fallen on hard times because of lack of money. Trying to keep up the maintenance around the farm and stuff like that. Um, and so we start out the story by meeting Paz, who has left the family home for about 10 years, and we'll see what happens. So Paz toyed with the frayed manila envelope filled with $50 bills. The clasp on the envelope had long broken, and there were several layers of tape across the seal. Her mother had sent her $50 in cash twice a year for 10 years, on her birthday and on Christmas. She had been back in Walkerville for a week. Actually, she was in San Pietro, staying in the town's only opulent lodgings. She sat on a wicker lounge, the envelope on a matching table, right next to her cell phone that felt like it weighed 200 pounds. The luxury hotel's beachfront was filled with hopeful surfers and weekend kayakers competing for uncooperative waves. The lolling breakers only skimmed the shoreline, teasing the participants with promises of more powerful waves. She breathed in salty sea air and imagined she felt a spray. The soft wind caressed her face, playing with her thick brown hair. Her body sought the sun, loving the warmth seeping into her bones. She felt starved of vitamin D, the Pacific Ocean, and most of all, Walkerville. She was homesick. Topaz Aiko Miyoshi Leggett was a wealthy 28-year-old widow. She looked good on paper. Stocks and bonds, several savings accounts, 3 checking accounts, and deeds to a Nantucket cottage she'd never visited, and the New York City brownstone she had lived in for 5 years. She wished she smoked. She wished she drank. She picked at her nails instead. Her hazel eyes and a smattering of freckles across her pert nose, along with high cheekbones, hinted at her mixed heritage. At 5'8", she was the tallest in her family. Her mother had literally been looking up to her daughter since she was 13 years old. With those hazel eyes, her olive skin, and graceful figure, Paz had been turning heads for a long time. Her diligent mother tried to shield her from any evils that might befall her daughter, short of making a prisoner of her. And, as most prisoners will, Paz escaped at the first opportunity, fleeing across the country to college. That daughter leaned into her deck chair, picking up her phone and putting it down again for the 100th time. She had a plan which she didn't know how to bring to fruition. That plan required her mother's approval. To make that plan work, Paz was willing to resort to bribery. Thinking of said mother brought such a lonely longing that her bones ached. She was so afraid her teeth chattered. Oh, hell, she said. And picking up the phone, she pulled up the number that was the first phone number she'd memorized, and the only number that had stayed the same throughout her entire life. The phone rang several times. Just as Paz thought the answering machine would kick on, her mother breathlessly answered. Hello? The voice was deep, almost gruff, certainly impatient. Hi, Mom. Paz choked, punching herself on the thigh. Damn, she didn't want to sound needy. Paz? Her mother sounded disbelieving. Paz, are you all right? Now her mother sounded afraid, as if Paz was injured or some other calamity. This was her mother's way. Counting to 10, Paz said, I'm fine. I'm in Walkerville. Actually, no, I'm in San Pietro. There was an incriminating silence on the other end of the phone. Perhaps, Paz thought to herself, she was just imagining it. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. I want to come home for a while. She heard her mother's breath catch in surprise. That pleased Paz. It wasn't often she surprised her mother. Her mother's matter-of-fact tone belied that surprise. Yes, please, you are always wanted here. She burst into tears. Her daughter wept, and Jerry could only wait. She wasn't sure what to do, a quandary since she always knew what to do. Paz cleared her voice and cleared her throat and said, I'll be there in a few hours. Thank you. Jerry Miyoshi put the phone down and sat on the old rattan chair near the telephone table. Her hands covered her face and she cried quietly. She didn't want her father, Russell, who was on the front porch taking in the sun, to hear her. In her late 40s, Jerry was petite but sturdy. Her skin was permanently brown from spending her life working the farm. Her nails were calloused, and her fingers were callous and her nails were neatly clipped. She couldn't believe that Paz was so close. Their estrangement had lasted for over 10 years. She dabbed her face with the hem of her t-shirt, wiped her hands on her jeans, and got up. Taking a deep breath, she slapped her hands on her thighs. Time to start dinner. So that's Paz coming back home after a 10-year absence. And this next scene, a Bendigo, who's a special character, and we heard him mentioned, a few times in other books. He's sort of this fatherly figure that's sort of, been overseeing a lot of the Walkervillians. So a lot of the young Walkerville people have come home, and a Bendigo wanted all of them around him. So he's called for, like a little get-together. The upstairs flat was filled with merrymakers, all under the age of 40, except for a Bendigo. He gazed around the room from the vantage point of his tobacco leaf-colored club chair and ottoman. A small side table held a crystal glass of 25-year-old Macallan whiskey, a gift from Torquil. A Bendigo was content. He was surrounded by a generation of Walkervillians who either stayed or moved back to this great town. Oh, excuse me. Raising families, building businesses, falling in love, finding each other again, staying together, building lives together. Some of these have produced the next generation who would grow up in this trouble-free zone, this miracle of love and bountiful land. Fiona, looking achingly like her own mother, was holding her infant son Caleb, who had sprawled in trustful slumbers on his mother's lap. His twin sister Kate was held by her doting father. No one had been more surprised than those two when they discovered they'd be having twins. Ginny, Francis's older sister, looked back through the family history to discover their maternal grandmother had been a twin. Almost 2-year-old Gordy was being rocked by his mother, lovely Josie, whose eyes roamed the room looking for her Al. Bendigo noticed Bree and Rowan in a lively discussion with Paz and Jeff. Torquil, the lone Scot, was trying his best to keep up with the conversation. Rowan, Jeff, and Paz were like siblings from different families. Bree and Torquil were now part of that family. Paz may not know about Torquil, but he was in her life, Bendigo chuckled. Ruth, lovely Ruth, was getting Trevor another drink. Bendigo had made sure to introduce Paz to him earlier that evening. He was content. How blessed was he, bringing this solid group of friends and family together. Wincing, he felt a shock run up his left arm. Peaceful. Paz had noticed that Bendigo hadn't changed position for a while, and he hadn't touched the inch of scotch that he loved. She was prepared for the worst. She gently touched his forehead. She turned off the CD player of the light classical music Bendigo favored. This got everyone's attention. With tears trailing down her face, she announced shakily, Bendigo's dead. I think he had a heart attack. Which proved to be the case. He had not passed his latest physical. He refused to give up his cigars and his sugar intake. His lovely alcohol he would not give up. He exercised only sporadically. In reality, no one was really shocked. There was a respectful silence as Rowan called the sheriff's office. Individually, everyone there made their way to his body, not touching him, just spending a few minutes in silence. Everyone in that room had been grateful for his part in their lives. So that's it for tonight. I'll be reading more Renaissance. You know, like a mom, I shouldn't really say which is my favorite kid or which is my favorite book, but I got to tell you, there's a part of me that really loves this Renaissance book. I wrote it with these characters who really wanted to be written about. So, thanks for joining me, and don't forget to look down below on this page. There's lots of useful information. If you like us, please click like. If you want to, find out how to get in touch with your questions and feedback, just look at the links here. I'd love to hear from you. And if you want to leave a comment or something on this page, that would be great. You know how it is when you cruise YouTube and you got little, you can make little comments. Also, AC, our factotum, is archiving all these readings, and there's a link to that playlist below, along with the link for tomorrow night's live stream. And I'll be back in 11 my time again, and so just kind of a heads up. This is the last week that we're going to be reading Monday through Friday. Next week we'll be reading on Monday and Tuesday, and then it'll be September, and I was just going to read every night for the month of August. So in the month of September, we're probably going to be doing this Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So I'll be reminding you. So again, thank you for showing up, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.